The hall gleamed like the interior of a gem, its crystalline walls scattering starlight into fractured rainbows that danced across rows of alien dignitaries. Spires of violet fire hovered midair, ethereal lanterns of some glowing gas. Their gentle pulse synchronized with the orchestral hum of a dozen alien instruments. The bride stood in the center, a pale veil cascading like moonlight over her shoulders, her breathing taut yet controlled. She was human, a rare spectacle here. Fragile, some murmured. A novelty. Others whispered she embodied Earth's bold attempt to stand shoulder to shoulder with civilizations that had forged empires while humanity still inscribed songs on cave walls. She smiled nonetheless, a nervous but determined curve of her lips. The audience wavered between laughter and applause as the human ritual of cake was unveiled. A towering three-layered confection of sweet bread and cream provoked murmurs of disbelief from insectoid lords nourished on mineral slurry, and scaled monarchs who had never tasted sugar. Children of the near hissed in amusement as a human attendant sliced pieces with an absurd silver knife. "They bring knives to dessert," a lizard lord muttered, and his retinue chittered in delight. The bride flushed, yet held her head high. Every gesture scrutinized, every glance measured. Her people were newcomers on this grand stage, and the galaxy's audience was merciless. Still, curiosity glimmered in some eyes. A feathered elder, wings bowed by age, whispered to her kin that humans seemed to find joy even in the smallest rituals, suggesting resilience in such simplicity. A reptilian scholar, voice gravelly like rain on rock, leaned in, intrigued by the human song that followed. Her cousin's off-key rendition of an old Earth ballad, so heartfelt in its awkwardness it drew chuckles instead of applause. Even the laughter fascinated her. Each note, each cake crumb became a shield. Alone among titans, she had chosen this union knowing its meaning. A bridge, a dare, a promise that Earth would claim no subservience. Her hands trembled only when unseen. Then came the shift. The music stuttered. The floating flames dimmed. A shadow swept across the hall, all heads turning. The Galactic King entered unannounced. His presence silenced laughter. Colossal, armored like a living organism, scaled plates shifting as though breathing. His eyes blazed like collapsing stars. When he spoke, the hall trembled. "Is this the wedding?" His voice, honeyed with scorn, dismissed the gathering as a playhouse feast for children. Some bowed, some averted their gaze, while others smirked at his mockery. The king had ruled longer than Earth had known electricity. His word was law, thunder none dared oppose. The bride steadied herself, veil quivering as his guards marched behind, massive war-bred creatures. One brushed the cake table, cream splattering across the crystalline floor. Laughter rippled again, sharper this time. The king circled her like inspecting a delicate trinket. Fragile, he mused. He reached for her veil, and before she could retreat, tore it free. Gasps filled the hall. Her hair tumbled loose, dark and wild. Her face bared not as ornament but as a woman flushed with shame. This is Earth's offering, a trembling doll before a predator. The hall buzzed with cruel delight. Some whispered of human weakness. Others turned in discomfort. Her hands clenched, nails biting her palms. She said nothing. Then he pressed further. Gesturing, one guard seized the wedding gifts, smashing them before delegates' eyes. Trinkets shattered, fabrics tore. She parted her lips, words ready, but they lodged in her throat. She caught the gaze of a feathered elder, who quickly looked away. No one would stop him. No one dared. The king leaned close, breath sharp. "Does your world believe ribbons and sugar grant entry to our councils?" He let the veil fall, stepped on it and smiled. "Your husband is nothing but a clerk. I expected defiance. I see only a trembling child." Her throat burned, cheeks aflame, yet when she spoke, her voice was firm, directed not at him but at the room. "My husband will come." The words rippled like steel beneath silk. The hall laughed. Some mocked, others whispered. Humans speak in riddles of love and loyalty, as if sentiment could rival steel. The king's smile widened, predator savoring delusion. He repeated, "He will come, tasting it like fine wine. Then let him witness what becomes of brides who mistake fairy tales for diplomacy." Guards chuckled, a grinding boulder sound. Whispers spread. Her husband, minor envoy, human in polished shoes. The king would crush him. Others smirked. Humans toy with politics yet bear no claws. Their strength lay in laughter and stories, not teeth. Yet not all were convinced. A Naren scholar frowned. He had studied human history, their conflicts, their revolutions. A line from one of their old texts lingered in his mind. Never mistake kindness for weakness. He leaned toward his companion, murmuring, "Be vigilant." They smiled too freely. Meanwhile, subtle currents shifted. A sensor in the hall flickered, detecting phantom fleets at the edge of neutral space. A guard's calm whispered static. One of the floating flames guttered and died, though no breeze moved. In the shadows, unnoticed, attendants paused, eyes glinting with something sharper than simple duty. The bride, still bareheaded, let the faintest curve of a smile touch her lips. She no longer cowered. She understood. Oblivious, the king bellowed for music to resume, for laughter to mask the trace of defiance. He sprawled onto a throne dragged into place, armor scraping against crystal. His arrogance filled the room like a toxin, and the hall pretended to inhale it willingly. Then the doors groaned. First just a strain, wood and metal under pressure. Then they burst open, and silence fell like stone. A man entered. He wore no armor, carried no weapon. His suit bore the clean lines of diplomacy, earth fabric tailored with precision but without flourish. Hair neat, posture unremarkable, face calm, almost boyish. He could have been mistaken for an accountant, had his eyes not been so still. He paused only to adjust a cuff. Then he smiled, small and polite, showing no teeth, no fear, no anger. "Your Majesty," he said, voice warm with courtesy. "Thank you for attending my wedding." The hall did not breathe. The king sneered, anticipating mockery, but none came. Silence pressed in, unyielding. Relief sparked in the bride's eyes, something dangerously close to triumph. The man advanced, each step deliberate, as if the floor itself carried him. He bore nothing, not even a datapad, yet all eyes followed, unease spreading like frost. He reached the bride's side, bowed slightly to her, then regarded the king. His smile widened just enough to remain courteous, not warm. "I believe," he said softly, drawing even the most distant guest forward, "we have much to discuss." For the first time that evening, the Galactic king did not appear amused. The human diplomat stood before the throne as though a modest supper table separated them from the empires assembled. He adjusted his cuff once more, not from vanity but ritual. Calm, composed, seemingly fragile in a hall where power measured by size, weaponry, or reputation, he appeared almost insignificant. Yet the silence following his entrance was dense as stone. The king leaned back, finally laughing, low and rolling like boulders meant to crush an intruder. "This," he declared, spreading clawed hands to the assembly, "is the husband, this clerk in flesh, this polite insect daring to speak to me as if I were his neighbor across a fence." Guards laughed dutifully, boots pounding crystal. The diplomat inclined his head, expression unchanged. "A neighbor, yes, though on earth we sometimes bring pies. I regret I brought nothing but conversation." He paused, feigning regret, then added lightly, "Though perhaps conversation is more filling than pie, depending on appetite." Scattered chuckles rose, not at him but despite themselves. Aliens unacquainted with humans often misread their humor as weakness, warmth as naivety. Yet the diplomat's unshakable composure forced even the most condescending nobles to listen rather than sneer. The king's eyes narrowed. "You joke while your bride is humiliated. You jest while gifts lie in shards. Do you not burn with rage, human, or are your kind too bloodless for fire?" The diplomat turned to the bride, brushing fingers lightly against hers, seemingly accidental, yet deliberate reassurance. Her shoulders relaxed. Then he faced the king again. On Earth, he said, children are taught not to make a scene when guests misbehave. Rage is wasteful, but consequences. His eyes glimmered, smile tightening slightly. Consequences have their place. His words rippled through the chamber like hidden currents. Some dismissed them as empty. Others frowned, sensing weight beneath the simplicity. The king leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. Consequences, he said, savoring the word. You speak as though you command them. Not command, the diplomat said softly, almost apologetic. Recognition only. Earth remembers, Your Majesty. We remember when hands reach where they should not. Songs are written of it. History books, children's bedtime stories, even murmurs among kin. A feathered noble whispered. He speaks of threats with a smile, as though reciting nursery rhymes. A scaled matron hissed. Danger lurked beneath his courtesy. The king's sneer deepened, yet the diplomat remained unshaken. He requested a glass of wine, and when a trembling attendant poured, he swirled it idly, letting the liquid catch fractured starlight. This vintage is remarkable, he said, inclining toward the king. A gift from your private reserves, no doubt. Most generous. On Earth, we rarely pour our enemies a drink before battle, yet generosity is admirable. The king's gauntlet clenched the armrest. You suggest battle where there is none. You sit here at my mercy and think to parry me with words. Shall I crush you now, before your bride and her pitiful world? The diplomat sipped slowly. Mercy is an interesting word, he said, setting the glass down. On Earth, mercy is offered when the knife is already at someone's throat. Otherwise, it is merely tolerance. And tolerance is brittle, wouldn't you agree? The hall seemed to contract. The air thickened. Guards shifted uneasily. Some nobles' eyes flicked to the vast windows framing the starfield, where distant flashes appeared, faint enough to be tricks of light or warnings. The king waved dismissively. Enough riddles. Speak plainly, insect. What would you have me do? Apologize for scuffing your bride's cloth. Kneel to your dirtball of a planet. The diplomat leaned forward, elbows on the crystalline table, voice low and even. I would have you consider the cost of underestimation. You touched my wife. That makes this personal. Quiet words, yet they silenced the chamber more effectively than the king's roars. The bride felt his hand cover hers, steady and warm. He did not glance at her, but the pressure said everything. The king bared his teeth. Personal. I have shattered empires over slights less grievous. Do you dare threaten me here, human? The diplomat's smile sharpened. Threaten? Oh. Humans rarely threaten. We promise. He tapped the table lightly. The sound echoed unnaturally in the crystalline hall. And we always keep promises. Whispers spread among the guests. A reptilian elder hissed. He speaks as though Earth is more than it seems. Another hissed in reply. Yet their fleets are few, their world untested. He bluffs, some thought, though doubt lingered. The diplomat rose, straightening his jacket with deliberate precision. He paced slowly, circling the king as if unaware of danger. His words casual but barbed. Your Majesty's palace in the eastern quadrant. Impeccable design, though the hidden armory is poorly maintained. Rusted cannons, faulty shields. A pity. He smiled apologetically, as if critiquing a neighbor's roof. The king stiffened. Your third cousin is in hiding, burdened by debts from that border war. Difficult for someone of such stature. The diplomat's tone remained conversational, almost regretful. We humans have a phrase. Skeletons in the closet. You appear to have several. Gasps rippled. Some laughed nervously. Others were horrified. The king's claws gouged grooves into the throne. Finally, the diplomat stopped, standing directly before him. Forgive me. I read quickly, reports, transcripts, dossiers. My wife teases me often, but information like wine should be savored, especially when guests expect entertainment. The king surged to his feet, towering. "You dare spy on me, insect?" The diplomat's smile widened, eyes calm. "Spy? Well, preparation. Earth is new to your counsels." "Yes, but we've been preparing first impressions for a long time. And we do not enjoy being made fools of." Fury radiated from every scale as the king opened his mouth. The diplomat lifted a finger, silencing him as softly as a breeze. "Do you hear it?" he asked the hall. Confused murmurs rose. Then they heard it. Faint static on guards' comms, subtle hums from wrist devices. The windows revealed faint movements in the starfield, shapes too orderly to be random, too numerous to be coincidence. The diplomat's voice dropped, patient and cutting. "Our fleets are not yet within your borders, your majesty. Not impolite but nearby. Close enough that even a sneeze from your throne would be noticed." The hall shifted from mockery to tension. Nobles exchanged frantic glances. The feathered elder murmured, "How long has he planned this?" The diplomat bowed slightly to the audience, charm radiating once more. "My apologies for interrupting your evening. Weddings are meant for joy, not posturing. But it seems necessary to remind all that Earth does not bluff. We prepare, we adapt, and when pressed, we correct." He turned to the king, smile gone, replaced by flat resolve. "You touch my wife. That is the one correction I do not leave to chance." The king snarled, body coiled to strike, but one advisor seized his arm, whispering frantically. The diplomat observed, unhurried, as though watching children squabble over sweets. He lifted the wine glass again, raising it slightly. "Shall we negotiate, your majesty, before the galaxy learns what happens when humans cease smiling?" The words hovered like a sharpened blade. The silence that followed was neither amusement nor shock. It was the silence of beings who suddenly realized they stood in the wrong place, at the wrong time, before the wrong species. For the first time in ages, the Galactic King found himself speechless. His silence rang louder than any threat he had ever voiced. The diplomat stood, wine raised, polite smile intact, gaze unwavering. The assembled nobles shifted as if the floor itself had grown unbearably hot. At first they tried to dismiss it. Humans had fleets, crude, small, laughable beside elder species armadas. Yet unease gnawed at their certainty. He had spoken with precise knowledge of the king's private halls, his debts, his kin. This was no bluff. It was architecture. The king growled, voice like stone scraping stone. "You hover ships at my borders and call it preparation. You trespass on the sanctity of my reign." Sparks flew where claws met crystal. "Do you imagine Earth has weight to tilt the galaxy? You are a pebble beneath my boot." The diplomat's gaze did not flicker. "Boots," he said softly, "are only as steady as the ground beneath them. And sometimes pebbles break bones if stepped on carelessly." He set the glass down without finishing the wine, as if already knowing it was poisoned. The gesture sent a ripple through the crowd, sharper than any shouted threat. A jeweled amphibian lord leaned to a companion. "He speaks like a poet," he whispered. His words cut deep. The companion nodded, feathers shivering. Clasping his hands behind his back, the diplomat strolled as if the hall were his study. "You mistake this for escalation, Majesty. It is correction. On Earth, we correct errors swiftly before they become tradition. Consider the colonies that once ruled us. They thought us soft, naive, incapable of defiance." He let the silence complete the thought. Every historian present knew the stories of small tribes and fractured nations driving giants away with patience and ferocity. The king snarled, but the diplomat's tone remained calm, like a teacher explaining arithmetic to restless children. "When confined, we break cages. When mocked as prey, we adapt. When pressed, we endure until endurance itself becomes a weapon. And when underestimated," his smile flickered, brief as lightning, "that is when we are most dangerous." Murmurs spread, no longer mocking, only uneasy. Some wiser nobles leaned forward, realizing the human's presence was no accident. Then came the shift. Subtle at first. Servants moving in patterns too precise for chance. One by one, trays of food were placed, not in service, but in sequence, marking points on an invisible map. The floating flames dimmed, pulses synchronizing, making a scaled matron hiss. "That is no decoration," she whispered. "That is signal." The bride rose, eyes clear, back straight. Until now silent, humiliated, veiled then unveiled, she walked to her husband's side. When she spoke, her voice carried authority. "Do you think I was here only to wed?" she asked the king. "You believed me fragile, a pawn to break before the galaxy. But I was bait, and you swallowed the hook." Gasps erupted. Pride staggered the king, jolted by her defiance. The diplomat inclined his head toward her, pride masked behind calm. The bride's gaze swept the hall. "Every guest you summoned tonight was watched. Every guard counted. Every corridor mapped before I set foot. You chose the stage, Majesty, but the curtain belonged to us from the first act." The floating flames flared, casting long, twisting shadows across crystalline walls. Servants dropped trays, straightened, shedding disguises. Not warriors, not assassins, but operatives, unarmed yet lethal with knowledge, eyes fixed on every noble. The revelation spread like wildfire. The king bellowed, rising to full height. "Deceit! Treachery!" His voice shook, though less than the shock around him. The diplomat lifted a hand, silencing the chaos without raising his voice. "No treachery," he said. "Majesty, transparency," the diplomat said. "We humans believe in making truths visible, even if they scorch the eyes." With a snap of his fingers, the hall's windows flickered to life, glowing like enormous screens. Across them blazed stolen transmissions, catalogued secrets, wars financed by the king, colonies starved for profit, hidden debts, bribes accepted. Every truth laid bare in colors none could deny. The nobles cried out, some in rage, some in horror, others in gleeful delight at rivals' undoing. The king's sneer froze, melting into raw fury. "You dare expose me," he roared, spittle flying. "You turn my hall into a tribunal." The diplomat's smile thinned, razor sharp. "We did not turn it. You did the moment you touched my wife. I merely ensured the galaxy could watch your performance." The bride's voice joined, calm and unyielding. "We are not prey. We are not dolls. We are the storm you invited to dinner." Chaos erupted. Nobles argued. Guards drew weapons. Advisors shouted for silence. The king's aura of inevitability shattered. In its place, a chilling realization. The humans had orchestrated every beat. The king lunged, claws slashing, but the diplomat did not flinch. "Strike me," he said softly, "and every fleet you command will be ashes before your heart beats again. We do not need to fight, Majesty. You've already fought yourself. We simply gave the galaxy front-row seats." The king froze, weighed down by words heavier than any blade. He looked around and for the first time saw fear in those who had once bowed without question. Not of him, but of the calm, unarmed human before them. The diplomat leaned close so only the king could hear. "This was never about your throne. It was about the message. You thought you hunted lambs. You did not see the wolves at your door." The king's breath rattled, caught between fury and dread. He wanted to strike, silence, burn, but could not. The hall had shifted. Power inverted. The sand beneath his feet slipped. The diplomat stepped back, addressing the crowd with charm, almost playful. "Please enjoy the feast. No need for alarm. Earth is small, but our memory is vast. Tonight was not war. Tonight was education." The bride's laughter, low and steady, cut through like bells over storm tides. Nobles did not laugh. They whispered feverishly, recalculating alliances, debts, the balance of power. The galaxy itself seemed to tilt. The king stood rigid, shadow enormous against crystalline walls, but it no longer inspired awe. Trembled, diminished. He had been undone not by steel but by stories, patience, bait and hook. The diplomat turned to his wife, smile softening for her alone. "Shall we dance?" he asked, as though nothing monumental had occurred. She took his hand, lifted her chin, and together they moved to the hall's center. Musicians, uncertain but compelled, began again. The tune was human, strange and uneven, yet haunting. Each note fell into silence like stones dropped into deep water. They danced while the galaxy watched, a husband and wife moving with calm grace amid shattered pride and fear. The king could not tear his gaze away, rage boiling but restrained by the weight of what had been revealed. As the music wound down, the diplomat whispered, loud enough for all to hear, "This is only the beginning." The flames pulsed and the palace shook, not from the king's fury, but from transmissions blasting outward. Every image, every word, every humiliation streaming to the stars. By dawn the galaxy would know. The king's roar shook the chamber, no longer sovereign thunder, but the ragged bellow of a cornered beast. Crystalline walls trembled, fractures spiderwebbing across glittering surfaces. Guards surged, weapons drawn, eyes burning with loyalty desperate to save their bleeding master. Nobles shrieked or dove for cover as tables overturned, platters crashed, and the feast dissolved into chaos. The diplomat remained unmoved, hands clasped behind his back, as if the storm were a scheduled meeting. His wife stood beside him, chin raised, eyes unyielding, her poise mirroring his calm. Flames flickered violently as guards closed in, blades and plasma rifles raised. The diplomat sighed lightly, voice carrying with surgical clarity, "I had hoped we could keep this civil." He glanced at his wife. But civility is always the first casualty of arrogance. The first guard lunged. The diplomat moved not like a soldier, but a tactician inhabiting one. He sidestepped, caught the guard's arm, and twisted with precision, snapping tendons rather than bones. Incapacitating, not killing. The second guard swung a blade, and the diplomat pivoted, drawing the first guard into the arc. The blade sank into friendly armor. Shock spread faster than pain, and the crowd gasped. Humans had long been dismissed as amateurs in galactic combat, clumsy and crude. Yet here was a man who fought with the same courtesy he wielded in words. Measured, efficient, devastating. Every motion calculated to incapacitate without waste, to turn the king's own strength against him. By the third guard's lunge, 2 more lay writhing on the floor. The king roared, summoning his full company. Then the windows erupted in light. Fleets appeared in the void, sleek human ships, engines humming with restrained power. They did not fire. They did not advance. They simply surrounded the system, a silent net, teeth unseen but lethal. Across comms, human voices crackled, relaxed, irreverent, audible even in the hall. Target lock stable. Fleet holding position. Someone tell Dad we're waiting. The diplomat's faint smile suggested he was listening to a symphony composed long before tonight. Panic rippled through the nobles. Some scrambled for shuttles. Others pled allegiance on the spot. The galaxy rebalanced itself in real time. Earth had shown its claws. The king, however, did not yield. Pride wounded too deeply, throne too nakedly undermined. He drew a massive weapon from his armor, a blade longer than the bride was tall, forged from alloys steeped in the blood of conquered worlds. He stalked toward the diplomat, each step rattling the crystalline floor. The diplomat released the last guard, who crumpled groaning and turned to face the monarch. His expression softened. The smile faded, eyes stripped of warmth. The mask of politeness remained, but beneath lay something far older, far colder. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "if you wish to end this as an execution, then by all means try." The king swung. The blade cleaved the air, radiant with power. The diplomat slipped aside, close enough for the metal to tear threads from his suit. He did not counterattack. He let the king swing again, and again, each strike more furious, more reckless. Tables shattered. Walls groaned. The chamber shook under raw rage. The diplomat remained untouched, moving with the patience of a predator, letting prey exhaust itself. The bride stood tall amid chaos, eyes locked on her husband with fiercer trust than love alone could summon. She had endured humiliation, the stage, the veil ripped away, because she knew this moment was his to command. At last, the king faltered, breath ragged, armor scorched by his own strikes. The diplomat stepped close, faces nearly touching. The hall held its breath. "This was never about you," he whispered, soft, almost tender, yet carrying like thunder. "You were the warning shot." The king froze, blade trembling. Death had been expected. Instead, mercy, crueler than execution, came. The diplomat turned, leaving him hollow before the galaxy. Humiliated, exposed, enemies armed not with guns but secrets. Outside, the human fleet shifted formation. Not to strike but to encircle. Restraint became the deadliest decoration. They did not need to fire. The threat alone sufficed. On comms, laughter broke among human captains. "Well, that was dramatic. Think he'll cry. Cue the victory playlist." The diplomat let the banter fill the silence, letting the galaxy hear not soldiers at discipline's edge, but people who fought wars with jokes on their lips and steel in their bones. Nobles looked on, faces pale, whispers frantic. Some saw opportunity, others doom, but all saw truth. Humanity was patient predators who smiled while setting the table, bared teeth only when escape was too late. The diplomat returned to his wife, offering his hand. She took it, and together they walked through the wreckage. Overturned tables, shattered gifts. The crowd parted, even guards lowering eyes. At the great doors, the diplomat paused, voice calm, smile faint but unmistakable. "Consider this a kindness. Earth does not seek war. We seek respect. But should you forget tonight, should you place your hands where they do not belong again, remember this. We have patience enough to wait, and resolve enough to end." Words fell like stones in a lake, rippling through every noble heart, every trembling advisor, every open calm channel. He turned. The doors opened to the stars, vast and waiting. Fleets hung in patient silence, wolves at the treeline. The bride lifted her chin. Humiliation transformed into dignity carved in stone. She was no pawn, she was the spark. The king collapsed into his throne, blade falling, armor heaving with each breath. Spared, but the mercy worse than death. He would live in the shadow of that smile, every noble measuring him against the unarmed man who had walked into his hall and left with the galaxy's fear in his pocket. Outside, the fleet repositioned, precise, a silent signal. Earth had not come to conquer, but to stay. The diplomat and his wife stepped into the corridor. He glanced at her. The mask cracked, smile softened, eyes warmed. "You were magnificent," he said. She squeezed his hand. "You promised," she replied. And he had kept it. The palace shuddered as transmissions finished flooding the stars. Across worlds, councils, and empires, truth settled like frost. Humans smiled because they already knew the ending.